Be seated. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's beautiful out. I love these Sunday morning drives up the mountain during the autumn. It's just amazing. The sun just coming up over the hill and through those golden trees. I always feel like I'm going through a heavenly tunnel there along Barton Flats and coming on up. It's just amazing. So
You
great.
are, Father.
Huh?
You
I am
are.
going to. All right, I hope it's in a figurative sense, though. Oh, my goodness, where do I start today? I'm going to focus on character today. Character, the character primarily of St. Paul, and hopefully apply it to ourselves. Mary asked me yesterday, she said, I wish I could hear your sermon. And I said, you don't need to hear it, because if you can't see it, you don't need to hear it. In other words, if you don't see this in my life, don't come and listen to it, okay? Because that's really the challenge, not to the words we speak, but the actions we take. And boy, I have so much to grow in regard to today's message. So maybe it's a good thing Mary's not here to listen. There's nothing like the ones you love the most to give you the best view of your own life, right? We had the sad service, the burial this week of Congressman Elijah Cummings. I was just taken in the few things I had heard from Mr. Cummings over the past few months of his character. I thought he was a man of incredible insight and a depth of character that's really missing in our day and time. I loved to hear him talk, and I was so sad as the country was to lose him at this time. But he was a man of not just piercing commentary, but I just felt a good spirit about him, something that's so missing in our political culture today. And so for so many reasons, we will miss him. He brought rare characteristics, as former President Barack Obama said, of kindness into the public sphere. Something that is so needed in our political arena today. Something that's needed in our homes, something needed in our churches. Just that rarity of human kindness. It takes a lot, though, to be kind. And it takes a character who is willing to not exalt oneself above another. People said of Congressman Cummings, he was a friend. He was my friend. And Mark Meadows, the North Carolinian congressman, said there was an unlikely, unexpected friendship. And others felt that way about him too. It's like he was my friend. If everybody's your friend, then there's something unique about your character that allows that to be so. And I think at its core, it's the ability to not lift oneself up above another, but to see the other person as worthy of love and respect and dignity. So yes, we will miss him. And I'd like to shift gears just a little bit to St. Paul, because I think he was a man of similar temper, similar character, a man who had been tried under so much fire and through his life. And today he's writing the second epistle to Timothy. This is the very last letter that Paul wrote before his martyrdom. He's writing from prison to a young man named Timothy, who he regarded as his son in the faith. Paul had cultivated and nurtured Timothy in the Christian faith and teaching him how to be an effective minister of Christ. And it's interesting that that relationship was so key to him as he's preparing to die. Paul's been through a lot. He's been denied by people. He's been abused. He's been tortured. He's been deserted. He's been refuted many times. And he's had other people who he really loved and respected just deride him, really. So he's a man now alone with his thoughts, and he's looking back, reflecting on his life and preparing for his death. And he says those powerful words, I've fought the good fight, I've run the race, and I'm ready. And he's finally a man who's at peace with himself and ready to let go. I think kind of like Elijah Cummings, he was a man who knew why he was here. He knew what his purpose was in this life. And he wasn't going to be at rest until he fulfilled that purpose. What was his purpose? He tells us right here in the reading today. Get my glasses back on. It said, the Lord stood by me and gave me strength so that through me, my purpose, the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. He'd done so many things in his life, but at the conclusion, that was his purpose, was to make the good news of Jesus Christ known to the Gentiles. That was his purpose. A man who had really forsaken so many other options in order to narrow in on the one that was most important, the one where God had called him to focus his time and attention. And so in that purpose, he felt that he had fought the good fight. He had run the race, finished the race, kept the faith, he says. He also said that he had been rescued from the lion's mouth. What do you think that means? Rescued from the lion's mouth. Well, figuratively, I mean literally, he was rescued from the lion's mouth because he wasn't tossed to the lions. For that was not his fashion of martyrdom. He was not devoured by a lion. But spiritually, he was talking about the adversary, the devil in his life. Peter, the other most famous apostle, I guess, borrowed that same imagery in 1 Peter 5:8. He says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. So similar, Peter and Paul both knew that they had an adversary in this life. It wasn't just them against the world, it was them against the unseen forces in the world. He knew his purpose, he knew his adversary. And through that, he trusted his Lord. And that's really the heart of what you get when you read Paul's message, is his incredible trust in God. Trusting in God at the time of his execution, trusting that his life had meaning, trusting in what was going to come after by entrusting it to somebody like Timothy. Even more, Paul went on to, he said, he forgave others, didn't he? He talked about people who had, how does it say here? Let's just read it right from Paul. At first, my first offense, no one came to my support, but all deserted me. May it not be counted against them. Sounds kind of like the words of Jesus from the cross, doesn't it? He had adopted a forgiving attitude towards his oppressors. So he knew his purpose, he trusted the Lord, he forgave others, he overcame the lion who devours, and there was one other thing he did, that was to entrust judgment to the righteous judge. I have to believe Paul was somebody who loved to judge others. I really do. I mean, he had the mind and the knowledge base and the experience to be a judge of other people. And yet, he tried with all of his might, imperfect as he was, to allow God to be the righteous judge. So that leads us to the gospel and the idea that I would like to talk about in the focus, closing really of my message today, and that is how to be justified. You don't think in those terms very often probably, oh, I need to be justified today. But I bet you hardly a week goes by that you don't try to self-justify yourself. Something's going to happen on any given week where you want to be what? Right. Dr. Phil said something years ago that has stuck with me, and I've used it in more than one wedding sermon. He said, do you want to be happy, or do you want to be right? The person who has to always be right is not a very happy person, and people around them are definitely not very happy people. The person who has to judge others and constantly be evaluating is not the best friend. That's not the person you want to go to in time of need. That's not the person you pour your heart out to when something's burdening you. Justification means to be at peace with God. And Paul knew he was at peace. I have to believe Elijah Cummins was at peace. He knew who his judge was. We had self-evaluations this week in my office. Anybody love self-evaluation? I mean, not self-evaluation, work evaluations.
Yeah.
That's something you really look forward to.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So the process is this. First of all, you write up on the computer your self-evaluation on all the categories, and you rate yourself. And then your manager writes up all your commentary and rates you. And then the two of you get together, and bang, you put the two together, and you come up with an average. And that's what you are. You're average child, aren't you? And you feel very average when you have these experiences. It was interesting to me because I guess I'm just getting old enough where I just don't really worry too much about self-evaluations or work evaluations. You go through enough of them over time and you realize, okay, I'm never going to be a 5. I might not even be a 4, but I'm going to do my job and I'm going to enjoy doing it, by golly. But some of my younger colleagues, I mean, they get wound up around this. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what she said about me, and it's just not fair. You know that feeling, don't you? It's just not fair to be judged. I went to the store this week and bought some flowers for Mary, who was returning from Iowa, and I put them on the counter, and the very next morning, they were wilted and dropping. I picked up the flowers, and I said, I'm going to get a refund on these things. But I made the fatal mistake. I didn't take them back with me to Vaughn's. But I went to Vaughn's and I waited for 20 minutes for somebody to wait on me. And finally they waited on me and then they said, oh, you have to bring the flowers. I thought of Paul and I thought, well, how would Paul react? And then I thought, I don't really care. I've waited 20 minutes. You are going to give me a refund on these flowers. And I said, if you want me to come and stand here with your soggy flowers, I will do that. But you owe me $16.34. I wasn't going to be wrong. And the young woman, what do you think she did? She finally gave me the $16.
Were you wearing your collar?
No, I wasn't wearing my clothes. No.
Did you get more flowers?
No, not from Vaughn's. I took my $16.34 and I kept it for the next opportunity to get some real flowers. But I just had to laugh about it when I came home. I thought, man, I needed to be right. With every fiber in me, I wanted to be right. I wanted to be justified, not just in front of the face of the clerk and then the supervisor, but the line of people that was behind me listening to the conversation. I wasn't going to leave there without being justified. So you know that feeling, don't you? We all want to stand right before ourselves and before others. And maybe we take our rightness before God for granted. So how do we approach that? Not like the one who said, thank you, God, that I am not like Alan. I'll pick on you today instead of her.
I do want to be right all the time.
I
That's
know
one of
you
my
do.
things.
This is the problem. This is a problem thing. I fast twice a week. I tithe a tenth of my income. I'm not like that miserable tax collector. I hide behind the mask of my own perfection. Whereas that miserable tax collector has no mask, right? He's just out there.
Yeah.
He just says, I am who I am, and it's not a very pretty sight. Please have mercy on me, a sinner. So I don't know exactly why this came to the surface so much for me this week, other than I did have that stirring feeling about the flower incident and the self-evaluation. And I thought maybe one of you might be struggling with some sense of need to be justified in the face of God and others. And mainly it's not even them, it's you. There's something in us that just wants to see ourselves as being right and perfect, never at fault. And that's not the case. So let's be more like Paul. We know our purpose. We trust our Lord. We forgive others, including ourselves. We know we wrestle not just against flesh and blood, but against a real spiritual adversary. And we relinquish rightness to the righteous judge. And then I think we'd be a lot happier people. So do you want to be happy? or do you want to be right? Amen.